I did notice that a lot of the references to K through 12, and at least in Maine, we are very much involved in pre-K. The importance of starting out with very young children, 3, and also starting out before that with family support and family visiting, critical issues in terms of making sure that there is a continuity through the whole educational process, and that kids are ready for school when they get to school. And I think that's going to be a very critical issue ultimately. The police and all of the law enforcement people are very strongly supporting this because they see the ultimate advantages down the line. But it's not the kind of thing that pays off tomorrow. And it's really hard to get people, and especially in America, to deal with postponed gratification. And I'm wondering how we can begin to make that a major issue so that we are moving in that direction with a payoff maybe 15, 20 years down the line.
Any comments on that? Yes, Representative.
I think that one of the challenges that all of us as legislators and business people and educators and parents are going to have to take to heart is, I think what both of our presenters mentioned, as well as Representative Sly, is that the world is shrinking. And there was a time when, you know, the only people I had to worry about competing with for various jobs and positions were the folks that were around me and the folks that were in the States. But now a person can get on an airplane in a matter of minutes. They can be here for the same interviews that our young people are interviewing for. My daughter, who is now an attorney, she's been practicing about 15 years now, but when she was in about 13 or 14, she was like myself and many others. She was kind of trifling. She made A's and B's, but she made a bunch of C's and D's also because it really wasn't that important. We got we had a exchange student from Nara, Japan. Her name was Akimi. She stayed with us 1 year. And I came home one night, and Akimi was asleep. She had fallen over in her book because she had studied herself to sleep. I went in the room, I woke my daughter up, and I drug her in the room. She's looking at me like I had lost my mind, and I said, "Look at that." She said, "It's Akimi." I said, "Look at it." She said, "It's Akimi." I said, "Look at it again." She says, "It's Akimi." I said, "Yeah, it speaks 5 languages. It has 2 high school diplomas now." I said, "It's going to be here competing with you. You're not going to be competing with Leroy, Bubba, Cockroach, and Skillet. You're going to be competing with Akimi." And somehow we've got to get it over to our young people that in this global economy, the world is shrinking, and the very job that they think that belongs to them because of their heritage or ethnicity or the fact that they are a United States citizen, that there are kids all over the planet who want those very same jobs, and they are going about it in a totally different fashion in preparing themselves. And so you're right. We've got to start young. We've got to change the way they think and make them know real early that they've got to be ready. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Is this one on? Okay. I want to address a couple of things that the gentleman who asked the first question mentioned. First of all, I couldn't agree with you more. The data are crystal clear that early investment in parenting support for people who don't know how to be good parents. I always like to say, nobody wants to be a bad parent. Everybody wants to be a good parent, but they don't know how, right? I don't know if you all have seen the data, but at 18 months, almost every child has the same number of words in his or her active vocabulary, but by the age of 3, there's a 10-fold difference between the top 10% in terms of socioeconomic status and the bottom. And that difference translates to the likelihood of reading at grade level at 3rd grade. You know all these, and and then that translates into the likelihood of graduating high school on time, and as you quite rightly said, that determines the likelihood of interacting with the criminal justice system. Now, if that doesn't speak volumes about the need to invest up front, I don't know what does. But what we do need to figure out exactly is this funding question. I was in, like many of you maybe, I was in DC for a couple of days for some NCSL stuff as well. serving. I'm on this Innovations in Healthcare Task Force, and we talked a lot there about the challenge related to upfront investment with a long-term ROI, right? And I liken it to, for those of you who remember high school chemistry, activation energy, right? You can have a reaction that generates a lot of energy, but sometimes you have to invest energy in it to get it started in the first place. And I almost live and breathe budget. It's mostly what I do. I don't do very much policy, committee-wise anyway. And it is very hard to figure out a way to pay for stuff when you're not going to see the ROI for 10 years. Oregon's starting to look at social investment, social impact bonds, things like that. And I think that this is an area of finance that we need to think about. Because just as it's reasonable for us to invest in bonds to pay for roads and bridges that will allow us to deliver the goods that we manufacture to marketplaces or get people to and from their jobs, we need to have the people who are going to be on those roads. And you're exactly right. It's going to be the people from other parts of the country or other parts of the globe who will fill those jobs. We have to figure out innovative models of funding as states, and we have to figure out ways to convince people that investing small amounts now in what will save us, in fact, do what I call the double delta, right? We won't be spending money on people in prison, and we will be gaining revenues and creating induced and indirect jobs when people are working instead of being in prison. So I'll be interested to hear if anybody else is looking at innovative funding mechanisms. We're still on the early stages of this, but I think it's a way to demonstrate that we take early childhood as seriously as we take bridges.
Thank you. I looked in here, we have that one whole section just on children and families, and it definitely talks about the pre-K, that investment, and we talk about that whole importance of family, and then of course we have the nutrition and poverty and huge impacts for our society and where we're going in society.
Could I just add one more brief thing?
Sure.
If that's okay. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Abecedarian Project. It's a project out of South Carolina. Yeah, it's out of South Carolina. I'm not going to go into it detail, but suffice it to say that for a relatively minimal investment, they've been following kids for 40 years. And with high-quality daycare and high-quality nutrition and parenting support for the first 5 years of life, at an average cost of about $13,000 per kid per year, they've got dramatic differences in health, in educational achievement, in job status, in earned income. And yeah, 40 years sounds like a long time, but if you think about how much money we're spending on healthcare, which is the other thing we know pouring money into, it's not a trivial sum.
When you were talking about the pre-K, I think, is there anyone here from Utah? I think they use social impact bonds for pre-K, I think.
It's been really, really effective. I think we were the first state in the nation to use social impact bonds for early learning. And in fact, our county, Salt Lake County, is looking at doing a similar thing for homeless population. And I think it's going to be a model that we're going to see over and over again in Utah.
Is everyone aware what social impact bonds are? Yes? No? Okay. Sure.
Just speak to criminal justice reform in Arkansas. Governor Hutchinson and with Senator Hutchinson's bill, his nephew in the Senate, on our criminal justice reform and criminal justice task force is focusing on the possibility of social impact bonds. I have some anecdotal numbers. Most of you all know when you talk about economic development, particularly when you bring conferences to the town, you talk about the money turning over 3 to 5 times before it ever leaves the economy. I do have one study that illustrates that for every dollar spent in industry recognized credentials for 18 to 35-year-olds, it means $21 impact in prisons and social reform measures. So we know it works. We're having a little harder time drilling down to her data that she has on pre-K, which is great. But we are moving that direction in Arkansas with our criminal justice reform.
I think there's a question back here, right?
Hi, I'm Kenneth Romero from the National Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators, which, as many of you know, is an affiliate of CSG. I was very alarmed when you presented your second slide where you state that by 2015, 65% of students will require training beyond high school. And the reason for my concern is that that presents a huge challenge, particularly for some minority groups. And I'll speak specifically in the case of Hispanics, because we have good news and bad news. In the Hispanic community, you have seen the largest reduction in the last couple of years of high school dropouts, amongst other, or as compared to other minority groups. But then that does not translate into these students going to college. If you poll Latino students that are currently attending high school, 90% of them will state that they think that college education is very important in order to be successful in life. Yet only 43% of themselves, 43% of them see themselves going to college. So that presents a huge problem in terms of the skills gap. So I guess what I would propose is, and I congratulate you for this report, I'd be interested in seeing some analysis in terms of the demographics as we try to define what policies we might want to implement in our different states as we look to the future.
Yes. I might clarify on this too. This doesn't mean that everyone has an AA degree, associate's degree, or a 4-year. It could be a credentialing or a licensure that might occur, say, through welding or through a CDL for driving a truck. Some of those things are included in this. And Joelle, would you have any comment on that with the what's happening here in Tennessee that might fit in, because you're doing the 55 rather than...
We are.
But that's 20 or is it 25?
25
Yeah.
to get to 55%. And I think the statistic about Tennessee's in the same position as Arkansas about we can't do it with high school graduates alone. You know, if every kid in Tennessee who's in high school right now gets a college degree, that doesn't get us there. So we have to find a way to reach this other population that has not pursued post-secondary training. But we're finding a lot of things that I think are going to help to inform this question about what do you do to help populations who want to pursue that, but for some reason are not making the connection that they can. I had a really interesting experience the first year I was mentoring with, it's actually the same student that I stay in touch with now, who was filling out the financial aid form. You know, Tennessee, to stay eligible for Tennessee Promise, you've got to fill out that FAFSA form by the date. It's actually before it's required. And it is a huge part of what we have the volunteer mentors doing. I mean, we were texting like little maniacs to, bothering. I mean, I used to call myself the nag in chief, for this kid. To get her to do that form. So it's Valentine's weekend when it's, got to get finished, and my husband and I have decided we're going to take a little getaway, and we spent about 2 hours. We both have a law degree, my husband and I, both are lawyers. It took us 2 hours to figure out the answer to a question that she had about how to fill out that form, because it's an online drop-down menu. Now, when I was filling out that form, if I had pulled down that menu, what kind of tax return did your family file? And I had not seen the correct answer for me, I would have immediately thought, well, something's wrong with this form. Because obviously I'm supposed to be able to apply to go to college. The first thing that her mom said was, see, I told you, you don't qualify for financial aid because the kind we filled out isn't there. And it confirmed this, skepticism that she holds about, college or about government programs. One of the major obstacles that we've run into in the first 2 years with Tennessee Promise is how difficult it is to get a parent to sign that financial aid form. We have a lot of families where there's a concern about immigration status, or there's a concern about a warrant or a failure to pay taxes in some prior year. There's a lot of fear around utilizing that FAFSA form, and there are things we can do to make that more clear just on the form. And, that's, and then there are also things that we can do with this sort of mentoring connection so that those kids have somebody else telling them giving them a different message about that. But I think, the data, the information about what was the obstacle they encountered? Was it that they don't live with the person who needs to be the adult who's going to sign off on that form, and how do you get them connected to them? Or they're not in a household with either a fixed internet access connection, or that they don't have some sort of Wi-Fi ability to, making sure that they know before the deadline that that's what they're going to have to do to fill that out. I actually think, though, there is some value in having to do that form, because it means that early in the year there is, an opportunity to force all of those conversations about college. Even if you think you're not going to be able to go if you don't fill out this form. So let's get this form filled out, and then we'll talk about all of those other questions. And it pushed that far earlier in the year. Tennessee had, the highest completion of FAFSA forms in the nation. We contributed to the largest portion of the increase nationally. And it's clearly because every high school guidance counselor had the message that, you don't want to be responsible for saying that some of your kids in your high school aren't eligible because they didn't get this form filled out. It's, that's just one step. So.
There was a meeting at the White House for educational leaders, and that was one of their main points, is getting both students and families engaged in filling out this form. I don't know if there's anybody here from Louisiana, but there was one person there, and they were mentioning that it is now required by law in Louisiana in order to graduate. Kids have to fill this form out, or their parents actually have to sign that they opt out from filling it before they graduate. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily the correct way to do it or not. I mean, every state has to decide that for themselves. But we have to have this discussion, because it is a great tool for students to start visualizing themselves as they look to their future, as considering college as a real and accessible option for their future. Because once you fill out the form, colleges start approaching you, start looking at potential financial aid, and then you say, oh, wait a moment, maybe I can go to college. So thank you for your input.
If I might briefly add, there are some issues that are systemic, and we talk about them, this big pile of issues. It's very difficult to deal with the fact that a young person can't see themselves in college, as you said. Many of us grew up in families where even if our parents were first generation to go to college or whatever, this is all we heard. I heard from the fact as far back as I can remember that I was going to college. I heard from my great-grandparents, to them being a school teacher was the top of the world. I was going to be a school teacher. So we were taught these things. And when you have the breakdown of the family and you have children basically raising themselves, and I'm not saying that's always the case, sometimes it's just a matter of not having the knowledge, but it's surprising to me how hard it is to give away a free education in my district, and getting kids into technical schools and other places, and just really making them believe that they can do it. So we've got our work cut out for us.
Okay, go ahead, Charlotte.
Thank you. I think one of the greatest answers to the problem with students not seeing themselves going to college is to do the early college and encourage them to take the concurrent. We have a college in Arkansas that hands out athletic passes to the kids, just to get them on the campus and let them see the life of what's going on. And they do some other things in association with that, but I think the concurrent and the virtual schools, if they can get 12 hours before they graduate, then they can see themselves in that, in that forum. And then the other thing I think is coming that we have to be cognizant of is that, just like our speaker today talked about what made those people successful on that boat. And it was not that they had possibly, high IQs, or they had been to college, or, they had those, that core knowledge, but they had those soft skills. They had what we call the social emotional learning, or mindsets of growth. And we're seeing states that are putting those back into the curriculum to make sure that students have grit, perseverance, integrity, and those mindsets that they can do it, those success skills. So I think that that's got to be a bigger part of education, and I think will change some of those cultures of, I don't see myself as a success and don't know what that looks like. If we can give them those skills early, and then, that's just going to bridge that gap to, them getting the core knowledge. So I think that's coming, and I'm thinking there's some really good data out there on that as well, how that works in the schools. So we're going to work on that.
We have one right here. And the mic hasn't been over here yet, is there? I want to give everyone a chance. Go ahead.
Thank you. Representative Douglas, I'm glad you mentioned that the point about pre-college. We put in place a piece of legislation and opportunity for every high school student in our state to take up to 2 college courses before they leave high school, and we cover the cost. And what it does is exactly what you said, and it was very intentional. And I think that the key here, and what I'm hearing from all of my colleagues, is we have to be intentional, about our ideas, our concepts, the work that we're doing, and especially the things that are data-driven, like the pre-K piece, that you brought up, earlier, as well. And I know it's a hard pull, but when the data supports the achievement, we have to put our money there. That's the investment in the future. And I jokingly like to say, somebody's got to pay for my Social Security. And if I don't take care of those little people, they're not going to take care of me. But I like to say that, but there's a lot more to it. And as we all know in this room, being advocates for those folks, this is where the rubber hits the road. So thank you.
One back here, and you, sir. We'll let Melissa talk, and then if you have something.
Go ahead.
Thanks. One of the recommendations that was mentioned from the report is the creation of stackable credentials, and I'm just curious if someone could speak to what that looks like, in particular if there are state policy levers that have been successful in encouraging credentials to be portable and build on one another in a way that makes them stackable.
Would you like to talk to that? Okay. Oh, she has a mic.
The best example of a stackable credential is probably for everyone to get a good feel for it is in the allied health field. To Representative Douglas's point about concurrent credit or dual credit in high school, we have a program, it's a pilot program where some high school students in Hope, Arkansas are going into the CNA program and completed this spring. And there's a little bit of a licensure problem because it can't be licensed until they're 18, but those are people that enter into the workforce and the CNA wage at $10.50 or $11.50 an hour, but then they'll come back for an 11-month practical nurse credential, still being in that work field and in the work arena with earnings, and then they potentially can go on up to a 2-year RN or 4-year RN. Those are all stackable on top of each other. Another way to look at it is multiple entry and multiple exit ramps, so that we can try to contribute to a better employment circumstance earlier on. Before, if someone had told me that I could get to a high-wage, high-demand job, and it took me 4 years. And someone came around to Ms. Douglas's point and told me, well, if you get started early, you get there 3 years. Well, at 55 years old, and I start looking at my inadequate retirement circumstances, I could figure out now that a year earlier earnings potential and a year less burden of college education means a lot to a lot of folks. Now, it doesn't fix all the problems. And back to the data and all this, one of the reasons why, this is the Georgetown 25 study, by the way, if anybody wants to get it, because the state numbers do differ. It's 65% national. Arkansas is 58% post-secondary by 2025. But a lot of the data, the credentials matter is for recruitment. We know how to train someone to do a specific job. The employer knows what they want, and we know how, and they can communicate that. The problem is if it doesn't have a credential that goes on a transcript, our economic developers, when they go to recruiting, can't show that we're a coachable population in Arkansas. And if they can't show we're not coachable, they can't show we don't have the infrastructure in place to deliver those credentials as well. So all of that, I guess it went back to data, but stackable credentials is a key component, particularly on the heels of the question right here about entering into the workforce at a better circumstance and then going back and stacking on.
If I could just add one word to that. What that does, though, for this in Stackable, it does not just give them better opportunity, but it gives them confidence. You start them out at that base level. You're there in high school as a teacher. You've got them through that CNA program. You've got them through that pre-pharmacy, whatever it is. And then they say, wow, I can do that. I can take it another step. So it gives confidence to those that did not reach and have those goals where they should have been.
Burning 4 years in political science and finding out that it's a prerequisite to unemployment. I have a poli-sci degree, but it also introduces you to the potential career earlier to find out how it fits or not.
We'll take one more comment or question here, and then we're going to move on. We have a couple of things that we need to do.
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief. I said I'd do this for a minute because I know it's late in the day and everybody's ready to go home. But playing off something Bill said, and the good senator from Oregon, where she said it was a double delta, and you said we're doing things incrementally. In South Carolina, we have written some legislation, and we have started on what we call GED boot camp, where we have 14% of our population in South Carolina that does not have a high school diploma. And in addition to that, we're losing 15,000 young people a year to not graduating. So while we're working on figuring out why they're falling in the river to begin with, but out here we're also having to snatch them out from drowning. So I just wanted to say that we have instituted this boot camp and be happy to share that the details of that with anybody that might have an interest.
Thank you for sharing.
And it's volunteer run, and we're producing certificates for $270 per student.
Wow, thanks. Okay, we're going to look at where do we go from here. And I loved one of the just statements that was at the end of this framework that you have in your hands, and it says, look beyond, not at the horizon. And I think that was brought out through various ways. Joelle really talked about that. You can't look back because we aren't going back there. We have to be looking forward, and we always want to know what's going to happen. Another area that was really brought out is, breaking down the walls. And I think that Bill really referenced that, that we have education, we have industry, we have a lot of different aspects of that, and even government. And it's like, okay, I think we have to start talking about this together instead of each one staying in their own little world and thinking that they're going to solve it. We aren't going to be able to solve this each one alone. It takes all of us working together. And then finally, that we as policymakers, we have to take the lead in this, and we need to work with all of those different entities in order to develop those strategies, to start innovating, and it takes those people working in the field along with those that we have to change statute or if money is part of it, all of those things and the education component of it to be able to match those skilled workers with the needs of business and industry. So with that, that's a huge challenge that we have, and I would just challenge each one of you to move forward using this framework, taking it forward as you, and you may have some things already done in your state that will fit in nicely with this. And Representative, you've been very quiet. He was a great contributor during the task force. Do you have any just couple words from your observations of the task force and the work that's been done?
I think it's been an excellent conversation. One of the things that I always think about in Idaho is, of course, I lived in Texas and Kentucky for quite a while, and it kind of goes back to what you were saying as well, that we have to help people get out of their comfort zone. And that's how they learn, that's how they grow, that's how they develop. And when you were using that example of some want to embrace what you were doing in AT&T and some did not, that's the first thing I thought of, is they don't want to take that risk. But yet the payoff can be so much that if we can just get people to believe in themselves and to move forward and to see the bigger picture, it would just be fantastic. And everything that Bill said from Arkansas, we've had a great conversation throughout the years, and he's right on with everything he said. And so I just highly encourage everyone to go back to your states and invest in your students, invest in your future, because they are going to take care of us when we need them, hopefully. Thank you for being here.
And thank you for all of you who have been here this afternoon.